The sun has moved into Aquarius and we are back from our little hiatus. Good morning, Alexis.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. Aquarius season. I love Aquarius. I have my son in Aquarius, but this one feels different than past years. It's super heavy on the Aquarius, which we'll get into a little bit. But especially as we move more into Aquarius season, we start to gather more planets in Aquarius, where we get to the point where we eventually have 6 planets in Aquarius, and that is pretty wild. So yeah, it's a pretty, it feels like how last year was heavy on all the Capricorn. Like if you look at a chart this time last year, it was just intense Capricorn. This year it's now intense Aquarius, right? So but we're in Aquarius season, so the sun is in Aquarius now. Yes. What are you feeling? How are you doing?
It's everything, like there's a lot.
Exactly.
And there's a sense of like, if we can stay really right here and not try to make decisions or pull from what is past us and done, or work with operating systems that are behind us, nor pulling from trying to predict the future, because we cannot predict the future. There's too many moving parts. There's too many constantly shifting. We've all got free will. So I'm really loving this. Like, everybody's coming to the party. And for right now, we have a lot of forward motion because every planet and our planetoids are direct. Chiron and Eris are our little planetoids that you and I play with. They're direct, along with all of the planets. Everything has got this like, and now we're stepping forward motion to it. And we are stepping forward because here in the States, it's Inauguration Day. Scary. There was an eeriness yesterday.
Yeah, there's an intense, we're recording this actually on the 20th, the morning, so that was before, a few hours before, but there's a really big transit happening, which we'll talk about, Mars conjunct Uranus. But just to touch on too, a couple of the things that you mentioned about this, like things are really shifting. Like we've talked about this, but this is a huge theme for 2021, like more so than ever, right? Things are always shifting, but it's like a signature for 2021 is shift and change. And so, yeah, really important to like come back into self and get like some really good grounding practices, come into the heart, because everything around us is shifting so fast. I think that's the thing, is the pace that things are shifting is right. Like it's on a fast track. And also Eris, who you brought up, she is very loud for 2021. Her and Pluto have been in a square, but they will continue to be in a square through 2021. So Eris is the goddess of chaos and discord. Right. And so it's like, what a perfect energy to have with all of this change and all this Uranian energy. Sure, we'll just throw some more chaos in there. And what it feels like to me that does is it just kind of turns up the volume, pushes our buttons a little harder, right? The noise and the chaos is a little more to push us into growth, right? Like that, I think, is what I'm feeling, is all of this noise and all of this, like, why, right? Why? It's for growth. And so we're just kind of on this fast track, which is helpful to remember, especially as we move through Aquarius season that is very fast moving and loud.
That's beautiful, Alexis. I keep getting this image of how maneuverable like a small boat is. We may not be able to make a 90-degree, a square turn with a small boat, but we can make like a 120-degree turn. We can shift course still when we're just navigating our own small boat. Cruise ships do not they're not known for their maneuverability. They're just not.
No.
And right now, the more of us as humans that are able to really navigate our small boats from our center and be okay with knowing that we're in chaos and just staying in ourselves, letting go of the idea that we can control anything else. We may have input, we may have what we have to say. Like, that's something that I've really been confronted lately is, can you stay in your center? Can you stay patient and gracious? And can you also ask for what you want or need? Recognizing you may not get it, but the importance of being maneuverable. Being able to say, this is something that I want or need right now. Oh, and I'm hearing that it's not going to work for you, so I'm going to steer my boat this way because I'm still going to go after what I'm wanting or needing with grace and with like really being flexible right now. And cruise ships are not flexible.
No.
And it kind of feels like we're in a big cruise ship trying to navigate waters that we have already passed through.
Right. And I like that idea of like us each in our own little boats. Mm-hmm. And that is, so Aquarius is about being unique, like being uniquely you, thinking outside of the box, acting outside of the box, breaking free of the box. Also, there's a humanitarian feel, though, of coming together, which we can still do. Like, if we're all in our own little boats, we have to do what's best for us, right? Mm-hmm. But we're still all these little boats out there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're all there doing our thing together, but we're also really checking in with self, rather than everybody being on the same cruise ship. Right.
Where we all have the same pre-programmed options.
Right. And we have like 2 choices for dinner.
Got your 5 choices for entertainment.
Right. Right. Like, that to me is not Aquarius. That is opposite of Aquarius of, yeah, there's the we're all together piece, but we have to all be in our own boats. That feels like really listening and accepting and you know, even like with all of the old patterning and all of the old stuff, like if we just think about it internally, how that can look, we're going to be kind of, right, buttons are going to be pushed of like, this is an old thing, right? Like all of these pieces around that Aquarius.
That murmuration, the way that birds flock, it's called a murmuration, and they all are individuals. And they're moving in creative harmony. It's that that the divine has allowed all of life its creative potential through the use of our own authority. And 2020 was about encouraging us and giving us the opportunity to step into our own authority. The divine giving us the creative potential to be our own authorities. And then we all have our free will that's been placed in our hands. Like, that's our greatest divine gift, is how do we come together in that murmuration or in that little armada of small boats where we're creating as a community, but we're not only having 2 choices for dinner.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. And I love those visuals too. Like, it just, yeah. It pulls it all together, and it really feels like some themes to remember throughout this Aquarius season. You know, and particularly as we move in, so the first kind of transit we mentioned was Mars conjunct Uranus today. So this is January 20th when we're recording this. And if you think about Mars and Uranus, so Uranus we've talked about before, but he's that great awakener. He's change. He's, right, the lightning bolt energy. And then you think about Mars, who is the warrior. He's about taking action. You know, that can be part of it. All of these things they're multifaceted. But if we're just kind of honing in on a few aspects here, you put those together, and it's the energy of sudden eruption, right? It's like Mars taking action, but it's the lightning bolt fast, like sudden eruption, right? Can be associated with earthquakes and things like that. So it's a pretty interesting energy to have on Inauguration Day. You know, I think we'll see as the day unfolds what happens. But if we can just remember to, be in our center and check in with self, because what's going to be happening, it's going to be bringing up a lot for a lot of people, right? Like reflecting back in the US, we're changing presidents. So we've had one president for 4 years and a new president is stepping in. Like that's a pretty big shift. So even just the shifting energy of that, Mars. Amy's saging us, just for those who aren't on the video version.
Those who are not watching the video, I'm just bringing in some nice cleansing sage to that whole event.
Yes. Yeah. Like get a huge sage stick out for that event, because it's a huge shifting. And yeah, that the White House is going to need some lot of sage.
You're going to need to sage the hell out of the White House.
And
the Congress and the Senate.
All of it. Like a lot of sage. Because that energy, like even feeling into the energy of today, like Mars conjunct Uranus, like that's pretty big. They're both in Taurus. It's a pretty feisty energy.
And Joe Biden's natal Mars is in opposition to this conjunction,
which is fascinating to feel into when we're talking about.
Excited.
Yeah, this conjunction of Uranus, Mars, and then he has his Mars opposite, right? Opposite.
Yes, yeah. It's clear. It's a clean opposition, which maybe speaking in an opposition. For those that aren't on the video, think about a conjunction as your palms coming together in prayer, the energy of coming together. And now I think of opposition as the backs of your hands coming together. So you have the option to expand and make space. You can look at it that way, I'm making space, or you can look at it as I'm pushing those things away. So it's an opposition can be about our mindset and our intention that comes with that energy. How are we going to meet the energy of, oh, there's collective Mars and Uranus over there pushing up against my natal, or am I being asked to make space for everything in there? I think about how much the message has been about unity, and unity often requires a lot of space, because if we have too much constriction, hello Saturn, if we've got too much constriction, we feel like jammed in there. We're in a box that's too small. So an opposition can be about making space for more and inviting more.
Right. Yeah, and if we feel into it's not an exact square, because most of the things that we talk about are dates when things go exact, but if we feel into what is happening that is also squaring this, it's all the stuff in Aquarius that we have been talking about. The Saturn and Jupiter, who are in early Aquarius, they're squaring this. Right? It's not an exact square, but they are squaring this Mars Uranus conjunction in Taurus, right? So you brought in Saturn, and he's a couple degrees away, but he's squaring this, bringing in more of that constricting, right? And they're almost, different energies of Saturn is constricting, Jupiter is expanding, right? So there is an interesting dynamic there. And yeah, a lot of it comes down to, of course, choice and what, like where we're at, and even feeling into it personally, where you're at on your path. Like, are you at a point where like you can see the value in Saturn? Like you can see the wisdom. Like it's often his wisdom is like uncomfortable at first. But he's Gandalf, he's the wise old man. So you can make it a choice of, is this going to be really painful and I'm going to like fight that strict dad energy, that constricting energy, or am I going to take the like knowing this is coming from wisdom, right? And I might not like it, but right. And so we have the choice there. And also with Jupiter, like he expands whatever. So are we going to expand, the freaking out feeling that we're in, or are we going to expand and take a step back and realize, okay, this is for, something the greater, like something bigger. Yeah, and so then feeling into back, we were talking about in the US, it's the inauguration, like this is all going on. So it's a pretty wild time. I mean, I think we all knew that, not even looking at astrology, right, for this shift to be happening. But then you put in, you know, you plug in the astrology for today. And all of these aspects, which are really loud for the whole year, are playing, right? You have, we talked about Mars conjunct Uranus, squaring Jupiter, Saturn, and of course there's other stuff going on there. But it's pretty loud. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, it is very, very intense. As a parent, one of the things I want to say about Saturn, because he holds such parental energy, it is that difference to like really bring it down to the practical of, are you parenting from a position of I'm the grown up, therefore I'm right? That's messy Saturn right there. Like, let's face it, that's messy Saturn. Or are you parenting from a position of spaciousness and recognizing that the human being, the person that you're parenting, has a perspective and opinions and points of view that could really be valid and help us grow. Parenting is a growth opportunity. And Saturn can either really hold the space and provide safety, because that's what a parent's job is to provide love and safety and to learn with their child. Or Saturn can be like, I'm the parent, this is the way it is, and you're going to do it my way. There's a lot of different ways to parent. So how do you find the happy space that is spacious and holding and provides safety without stifling the individual human that you have, that soul has chosen you? People, get on the stick. Says like Saturn's my dude, so I have to defend him a little bit.
Yeah, right. And we can look at this as, and I think with all archetypes, we can look at them as things in our external world. So you might see it like if you are a parent, you, right, like you can relate to that dynamic as the parent, but also like stepping into the shoes of the child, right? Like what the child is reacting to in that Saturn energy. And then we can also look within ourselves. We can look, so there's the external and there's the internal. How do we do that with ourselves? Because we do, like we parent ourselves, right? And we have that different parts, right? This is what archetypes brings up, all these different parts of us. And so just feeling into the internal, right, with that energy, that dynamic, that happens within ourselves, and how we react, right, to the energy of Saturn, how our inner child reacts, how we can hold ourselves in that, which is a whole nother kind of conversation, but just to pull that in.
Oh, Alexis, I love that you brought that in, because that's one of the like fun things about you and I dancing like this together, is we do have these really beautifully different lives. And so you can like, we can dance this way, and it's so much fun to have the, here's if you're a parent, and here's for all of us who are actually parenting ourselves.
Yeah. Right.
So,
which we always are. So yeah, that's, you know, just something to bring in. But obviously Saturn is loud too. We talked about him a little bit in one of our last podcasts of how he is pretty loud for the whole year as well. And we'll talk a little bit about him. Maybe, I don't know, we might not get to some of the, has some aspects happening in February, but we'll see how far we get. So
yeah, we've got more time. We can do another one of these.
We'll do lots of these. There's always lots of stuff. But a couple days later, so on January 23rd, we have Mars squaring Jupiter. And so we talked about Mars. He's conjunct Uranus today. So he's going to be squaring Jupiter a couple days later. And so Jupiter in Aquarius, Mars is in Taurus. And this is important because this is the third square, right? They met twice in 2020. So it's kind of the wrapping up of this 2020 transit. They met in August, beginning of August of 2020. Then they squared off again. I said met, but they were squared off in August. They squared a second time in October, and now they're going to square for a third and final time in this, dynamic January 23rd. So it's this wrapping up of this square that's happened throughout 2020. And it feels significant because most of the Mars squares, he squared off to Pluto and Saturn and a couple other things, those wrapped up in 2020. So those are kind of wrapped up. But this one was lingering. So this one I've had my eye on of like, okay, this is a 2020 transit. And of course we have moon cycles and eclipse cycles that are carrying through, but this is a big one that is wrapping up from 2020. And so the significance of that is like, okay, this is end of January, something that we're wrapping up from 2020. And so Mars squaring Jupiter, we talked about Mars as he's that action and he is the warrior energy. He's a very fiery, feisty energy. So he usually brings a spark to whatever he's aspecting. And then with Jupiter, it's about expansion. So it's kind of this expanding energy, and you can feel into the start of it, which usually in the first square, things are kind of dropping in, kind of just maybe like little sparks. So feeling back to beginning of August, around August 4th, what was going on, what was just maybe dropping in, what was, if you journal, go back and read your journal from around beginning of August, and then feeling into the growth through October. And now we're in this kind of Mars square Jupiter. I know for me, it's been really fascinating to look back what was happening in August and what's happening now. And there's expansion, and I couldn't have ever like put it together or, predicted or known. But it's really fascinating to look at that cycle of, okay, there's been 3 squares and we're entering into the third and final square of Mars and Jupiter. So that feels like a really big piece to wrap up from 2020. Also to reflect back and just feel into, because it might help to pull some pieces together, right? I feel like we're in this kind of crazy energy, and a lot of it is like, okay, we stepped into 2021, we're in a new year, like, like it's some kind of like, all of a sudden it's this new bubble which isn't true, but it might help to reflect back and be like, oh, okay, this is actually some stuff that was happening, like middle of the year in 2020, August. And okay, now I can actually see. That might be a little bit helpful to kind of look back and see what was going on there.
Yeah. For any of you that have your charts pulled, also look at where Aquarius and Taurus are sitting, like what houses they're in, because that's going to be an affecting piece also. My Aquarius sits in the 7th house. So like for me, with everything sitting in Aquarius, it is about relationships this year. And it's about relationships in a time that we are like, hey, how are you via Zoom? So have a look at your chart. If you don't know your chart, Alexis and I both do readings. So that's a thing. But there's also this piece that's coming in about like looking at what area of your life is kind of being lit up by all of this. Because there is this languaging out there in the world that, well, 2020 is done. But yeah, I think that's so important to recognize that 2020 and 2021 are not separate bubbles. Like they don't exist in a vacuum from each other.
No.
Like mash that up, mix it around, roll it in some mud and some feathers, and then you've got life.
Yeah. And there's always, there's always cycles, and there's always things that are happening that are kind of always continuing. Like a year is just one framework we use, but yeah, feeling into some of the things that are still carrying over. Like we have the eclipses that are going to continue on the Gemini Sag axis for this year, right? They'll shift eventually, but that's something that's carrying through. The moon cycles are continuously cycling and bringing us through, right? And so feeling into like there's always cycles that are happening. Like even, feeling into the shift, okay, some stuff shifted into Aquarius, but Pluto's still in Capricorn, and that's like a very long cycle. And so there's always that too, where yes, a year is a nice framework to like give our humans some like functionality, but there's things that are still carrying through. And so I think that's something that this transit is reminding us of, that there's this third and final wrapping up piece with Mars and Jupiter. And it started back in August of 2020, you know, so it's tying that in. And yeah, I think that's important to remember. We're always in different cycles. Like, yeah, one cycle might end, but then there's still all these other simultaneous cycles.
Yeah, time is not linear. Not linear. Not a thing. What's next for us, Alexis?
So then we have on January 26th, the sun squaring Uranus. So this feels very combustible kind of energy. Sun, Uranus, like the sun and lightning.
For those of you who are not watching the video, Alexis is making little explosions with her hands.
Yeah, it's that's what it's feeling like to me. Not that it can't be beautiful. The sun brings illumination. Mm-hmm. So there may be, and I'm not going to promise anything because Uranus is not about clarity, but there may be some there may be some insights and clarity around, because the sun brings illumination. But with Uranus, like, don't expect anything to, like, you know, come in a nice little package with a note on it. Like, that's not how Uranus rolls. So that we have that's around January 26th, the sun squaring Uranus. And yeah, it feels like whatever it's going to be, there's going to be some kind of sparking energy. Like, the other piece to feel into is, you know, these can also sometimes, a lot of the stuff we're talking about can feel really overwhelming, and there can be some anxiety, and there can be, you know, we're talking about very fiery transits here. We're talking about, you know, Mars, we talked about in the last two, we were talking about the sun. Like, we're talking about some really intense energies. And so knowing too, like, being really gentle with self, that these can feel a bit intense, and there might be some inner angst, and also externally there might be tension, like in relationships, and just, yeah, knowing that these aren't really easy transits. So just being really gentle. I just want to drop that in of, you know, it can show up in a lot of different ways. And so just being really gentle with yourself.
The thing that's kind of pushing at me right now is, I believe Lilith and Pallas Athena and Isis. We've got some goddess asteroids in this whole Aquarius party that's going on right now. Yeah. I mean, everybody's kind of having a party in Aquarius.
Yeah.
For Aquarius season. That's what's going on. The Jupiter and Saturn arrived back in December, and they set up. And they've been decorating. They've been getting things set up. But they arrived after Pallas and Isis. So Isis and Pallas got to Aquarius, and then Jupiter and Saturn, and they've been setting up the party. And now, like, this month, everybody shows up for the party.
Yeah.
And even the people who aren't, like, showing up in Aquarius are showing up via squares and other aspects. So there's this heart piece of, like, how big can you make your heart right now? Like, that feels like, with the chaos of Eris and Pluto squaring, with Pallas in there, like, really staying in your center and your wisdom and your maneuverability, the strategy of being flexible. Mm-hmm. With Isis there, like the soul shaman, she is about the remembrance of our soul self, of our spiritual self, of our hearts. Lilith is about, like, acceptance and equality. Like, Lilith is big equality. So those feminine players, they're at this party too. I just want to, like, bring them in. Be like, they're here.
And that's important too, because, yeah, like, Pallas did move in before, and she had been one that was in Capricorn with all of the players for 2020, right? The Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. She was with all of them, but she moved into Aquarius first, which I thought was really beautiful. And pulling in that heart piece, all of this is happening in Aquarius, but what is opposite Aquarius is Leo, right? And so if we feel into that axis, Leo is the heart. And so it's a reminder to keep pulling, because there's so much happening. Like all of our focus is Aquarius. It's like, if you look at it, pull up a chart, because it's pretty crazy, especially for like mid-February. Because Mercury is there also. So you mentioned some of the asteroids that are there. We have Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and the Sun currently, but more will be moving in as we go. And feeling into, there's so much pull in Aquarius, because that's where the focus is. It's real. If you look at a chart, it's pretty wild. But remembering to pull back, and what's on the opposite side is Leo in the heart, like coming into the heart. So I think that's a really beautiful piece that I've been feeling as well. And we have a full moon in Leo on the 28th, January 28th. So we have this full moon on that axis that is really emphasizing the heart. And that is a really beautiful reminder. And yeah, all that, the feminine asteroids, because, you know, most of the planets are masculine except for the moon and Venus, but we have asteroids there as well, who are bringing, right, this different flavor to the party. So that's there. And yeah, and the moon, this full moon, it's at 9 degrees of Leo on January 28th. So look at your chart, see what you have going on that axis. Like look at Aquarius, also look at Leo. So, you know, around exactly 9 degrees, but within a few, you can look what you have going on in Leo, what houses these are, because that kind of dynamic can be playing out between those two houses on that axis, Leo and Aquarius. And we also that day have some other stuff happening. So the sun meets up with Jupiter. So we have a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, and we have a Venus-Pluto conjunction. So they're not exactly aspecting the moon, but they're happening at the same time. So these feel important because we have the sun conjunct Jupiter, right, bringing some expansion, which is pretty interesting. So that is going to be aspecting this moon. We're going to have the sun and Jupiter, right, opposite the moon, and that's big illumination. Like moons can be big emotions, right, and sometimes they can feel really intense. And when we're talking about the heart, right, this is huge. And we talk about bring Jupiter, and there's expansion there. And so just knowing with full moons, there can also often be illuminations. We can feel into the last 2-week cycle from the new moon to full moon. We can also feel back into the new moon in Leo, which I believe was in the summer. I know we talked about
August 18th.
Okay.
I believe it was.
So August, we can feel back into, which also ties into that Mars square Jupiter in August, right? So it feels like there's a lot coming back around from August. And so, yeah, like knowing there can be things that are illuminated, but it can also be, moons can be intense emotional times. So there's that. And then, so that's on that axis. So those are kind of what's happening within that area of the moon. But then we get at the same time, Venus and Pluto conjunct in Capricorn. So that is, Pluto's about the depths. Like he doesn't do anything surface level. He wants us to go deeper. He's about transformation, evolution. So this does not feel like a light and fluffy moon. I mean, not that they ever are, but there's an extra emphasis because of what's going on in Aquarius and this heart pull and this Jupiter expansion. And then you throw in some Venus, Pluto, who Venus is about harmonizing and bringing together. So she's a beautiful energy. She's about love, self-love. But you combine her with Pluto and there's a bit of an intensity there. There's a bit of, you know, going a little bit deeper.
Alexis, you are so consistently, you're just so much fun and you're so delightful. And the way you put things together brings such amazing pictures to my head, at least. There's a piece, Aquarius is an air sign. And air is associated with thought, and Aquarius is new thought and new ideas. With it being opposite of Leo, I want to bring back that energy of palms together versus the back of palms. And can we approach this with making space for the thoughts and ideas to actually move through heart space rather than just being a mental body process? Can we take the thoughts and ideas, can we take the mental body processes and bring them down to heart space and run them also through an emotional process? So for me, that's what wisdom is when we take our intellect bubble and our emotion bubble and we cross it over, so there's that shared space there of where our wisdom sits, because we're running our thoughts and our ideas through heart. And for me, that's what this Aquarius Leo access is can we move from heart space, from wisdom? Wisdom comes from our heart and our womb and our heads combining. And we all have womb space, guys. It's just what it is. So can we really bring it up and move from heart? Move from our passion, move from what fires us, not what scares us. Passion isn't scary.
No, I love that, because you're right. And we don't, as a whole, if we just feel into, as a collective whole, we don't function connected to heart as much. We function very much, just in our mental and logical minds. And so, yeah, I think that's beautiful to the opportunity is there to combine these, right? And to, whether you've been doing this work for a long time or not, we can always have that reminder to connect the two, because in the world that we live in, it's just always pulling us back up to the logical and to the mind, and to be able to pull it back down into the heart. There's just a connection there that I think is going to be really, really important in this moon, and in this Aquarius season, but really in the year and always. Yeah. But that there's this opportunity to open or unlock something with the heart. And for as someone who has been, it feels like I'm constantly working on heart expansion and doing this kind of work. Like there's always more, right? And it feels like there's something really beautiful in this full moon, because the depth is there, and because there's this, it's opposite Aquarius, to connect in the mental realm, the heart, and then even lower, right? Like connecting in, you brought in womb space, like connecting into our lower centers, right? So whether you are, in a male or female body, we all have this deeper wisdom in our lower center. So that feels like a piece too. And I think, just remembering that grounding is going to be really important, because we're working with some really high Aquarius is just this like really high vibratory energy, which is beautiful. And there's, things get invented, and there's, new insights and really beautiful things that come with Aquarius, but can be very just this like high vibratory. It sometimes can be a little too much of that high energy. So we need to bring it back down. Heart and grounding, I think, are going to be, we've talked about it a lot, I think, because it's important to remember, okay, come back into heart and even lower and ground it.
Ground it.
Otherwise, we're going to be floating up in the ethers, which is cool, but not for a long time. Exactly.
Because I'm like cracking up here. I love that we're talking about heart stuff, and we have a guest podcaster. Leo has arrived. Leo, our heart-centered baby here, our little kitten, has shown up. He's like, we got this.
Exactly. Of course, Leo would show up when we talk about the Leo full moon.
Yeah, the Leo full moon, and being a lover of self and a lover of life and really making heart space right now. We're, you know, we're 10 months into this. This has been like the worst pregnancy ever. It's been a hard pregnancy. We're not done yet, folks.
And are you referencing the pandemic and the?
Yes, yeah, the quarantine and everything. Just where ideas are being birthed and run them through your heart. I guess that's just my biggest invitation right now, and it's my big invitation for everything going forward. I'm not even gonna say like Aquarius season. I'm gonna say everything going forward until the end of time. Bring it. I'm making big vows here, people. So that's how I roll.
Love it.
Mercury goes retrograde. That's a little thing.
Yeah, so that's what we end the month with, is Mercury goes retrograde around January 30th. So yeah, and you mentioned in the start that we have all this forward movement. We have all the planets are direct forward moving. And so that's for the next few weeks until we get to Mercury retrograde. So we end the month with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, of course.
Of course. Which means he's going to be there a while because he's moved in, and then he's going to head backwards, and then he's going to go forward again.
Right. So yeah, he spends a little bit of time in Aquarius, and yeah, that is a time, and I think we'll maybe just end on this, but it's a time to go within, right? And Mercury is he's a translator. So right now he's doing his thing. He's like, bopping around in Aquarius. I like to say he holds a megaphone up to whoever he's near. And so he's just like, bopping around. But he's going to go retrograde, and it's like, okay, now is the time to go within. And it's kind of beautiful in a way, because we have all of this stuff and all of this noise, and he's going to really be pointing it inward. It might not feel beautiful when we're going through it. But it is, because it's also a reminder when we work with these things, it's a reminder to go within. And it's not necessarily a time to like be externally vocal about things, or to, kind of jump into new things, because Mercury is really giving us a time when all this stuff is happening to go within. When planets go retrograde, it's a time to reflect inward. So yeah, we end the month with that. And so then Mercury will be retrograde through the beginning of February.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that feels good. We started with everybody's going forward, and now we can wrap up today with we've got Mercury, who's going to reverse course for a little while.
Yep.
And give us another chance to really check our interior, the way we talk to ourselves, our self-talk. Like, that is what Mercury retrograde is so often about for me, is it's a check your self-talk. How are you speaking to yourself? How are you thinking about yourself? Are the things that you are saying and speaking to yourself things you would ever say to someone you love?
Yeah, that's always a good little test of, would you talk to a friend this way, the way you talk to yourself? Yeah, and that's definitely a Mercury retrograde friendly reminder.
Yay, I love this. I'm sure we'll be back to do more, because as we have mentioned, Aquarius season is loaded this year.
Yeah, I'm feeling we'll maybe in early February come on, because there's more planets that'll be moving into Aquarius. So we have Venus and the moon and some other really fun things happening in Aquarius. So yeah, I think we will. I'm sure we'll come back and we'll talk about more about the Aquarius party. I like that is the kind of visual of everyone's having a party in Aquarius.
Yeah. It's like a cocktail party. It's a really great cocktail party for those of us who like to dress up and go to cocktail parties. Like, get out your cocktail clothes, folks.
Yeah. I mean, and with all those personalities, like, you never know what's going to happen. you know, can't say it's going to be just like a, you know, everyone's well behaved party, but it's a party. It's a party.
Sit back and watch it unroll.
Totally.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining me today, and until next time.
Thank you.